Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. I am joined by two great people here. We got our co-host, Francois, and we have a special guest here. This is a sponsored episode by NetBeez, and we have Panos Vusis here to join us to talk about the benefits of NetBeez and as well as talking about Wi-Fi monitoring and assurance. So how are you guys doing today? Francois, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you, Roel. Exciting to talk about NetBeez and have Panos on. So I'll let Panos introduce himself.
Thank you both for having me today. It's always fun talking to you guys, either online or in the real world. At the different events, we happen to bump into each other, right? A few times a year. That's always fun to meet and talk to the Wi-Fi folks. So my name is Panos. I'm a co-founder of NetBeez. We started the company almost, it's been like 6 years now. We are based out of Pittsburgh, and I'm really happy to be with you here today and chat about NetBeez and what we do in the monitoring space.
So how would you present the company? What do you guys do? What is NetBeez all about, and what type of products are you guys offering?
So our bread and butter is to give real-time visibility and remote monitoring for distributed networks, and both on the wired and the Wi-Fi side. Of course, here our focus today is on Wi-Fi monitoring, and that's what most people are interested in here. But we started the company as a way to monitor remote sites that don't have local IT and on the wired side, right? So that was I would say, low-hanging fruit and easier thing to do when we kicked off our product development. And a year down the road, we had the product in the market, focused on the wired side, and we talked to many folks in the networking groups, and they were really excited about what we were doing. But their first, I would say, suggestion or feedback was, that sounds great, but can you do the same thing for Wi-Fi? Can you give us that remote visibility on the remote sites, but on Wi-Fi networks? And with that, we have built a tool that gives you the ability to capture user experience at remote sites. In a nutshell, the way we do it is by using sensors. So you deploy a Wi-Fi sensor at each remote site. You want to monitor more than one sensor, depending on different parameters of the site or the location, and that helps you really put your fingers on what really the user sees at the remote site without you being there.
And then you guys have a nice dashboard where that's pretty much how you bring everything together, and you show the network visibility back to the customer, and you gather that data from the sensor back to the dashboard, and you pretty much show you monitor the network that way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you both of you guys are familiar with our dashboard. You have test-driven the product. The dashboard, of course, is, I would say, where the magic happens, right? The sensor, in a sense, it's a kind of dumb device, because all it does is collects data, some around the Wi-Fi performance, Wi-Fi status of your network, and reports them back to the dashboard. So the dashboard now is where everything is collected. Data is displayed, you get alerting, you get all the statistics or the baselines of your network. And that's what helps you to detect issues quickly, troubleshoot, and have information about the status of your network in general.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's what I like about NetBeez, because it is a separate sensor or agent is what you guys call them. And the reason why it's distributed is because for a lot of environments where you have different offices or different sites, you may not know how your Wi-Fi is performing. You may not be able to understand where some of the issues are. And so you touched upon the wired testing, which I think is also important, because a lot of times these Wi-Fi issues are not because of the Wi-Fi. It's maybe something like DNS or DHCP. And so you can further correlate that data if you have also the wired side sensor. But as we talk about more of the Wi-Fi testing in general, having these little sensors distributed into different areas of your office or at different sites will be able to give you an overall health view of how that site is performing, and whether or not a Wi-Fi issue is affecting a whole site, for example, or maybe it's everything across the board. Especially if you're going to test things like application testing, which you guys are capable of doing. You just have to set up what you guys call a target and do testing that way. But maybe we can talk about some of the basics and the core of doing Wi-Fi testing with NetBeez. Do you want to go into that, Panos?
Yeah, definitely. So, our sensors are a small size. I would say smaller than the size of an enterprise access point, right? Of course, we covered this, but the whole idea is to act as your eyes at each remote site, right? So typical installation would have from a dozen to several dozen or even hundreds of these sensors, right? Our companies, our customers may have locations and offices at different time zones, different countries around the world, hundreds of them, right? And that creates a big challenge when it comes to detecting issues in the network and also troubleshooting, right? Because imagine an issue happening in India overnight, where your development team is, but you're in the US, so it's difficult to coordinate, difficult to get people to lend you their hands to help you troubleshoot things, right? So the sensor now acts as a device, an appliance that not only helps you troubleshoot, but also runs active monitoring tests. And these tests, as you mentioned well, help you identify issues and often help you identify that it's not the network, Wi-Fi or wired. Strangely enough, proving that it's not the network is one of the most popular, I would say, use cases of our customers who have t-shirts with that, and people like them a lot because that's the reality, right? I mean, often the networking team is being pulled in every let's say ticket that is being opened, and you have to prove that it's not your fault. So these sensors now run these active monitoring tests, so you can test even applications, make sure that this application is working or not. You can test your infrastructure, and as you mentioned with the wired sensors also, right? You have the ability to test your backhaul and isolate that on your dashboard, and then also, of course, combine that from information you get on Wi-Fi sensors that may test applications, services like DNS, HTTP, run speed tests for bandwidth, and so on and so forth. So that information alone is very valuable to get this visibility you need, and also be notified quickly, right, within minutes or seconds when something goes wrong, without waiting users to call in, open tickets, and so on.
Yeah,
we all know how this goes down the road, right?
I think that's a very interesting part of a solution like NetBeez. It helps you to be more proactive than just response to issues, and that actually allows you to detect, because like you said, the sensor is your eyes, your remote eyes on the network. You can actually detect anomalies before the users even notice it, and then you can try to. You might not be able to fix it right away, but at least you know about it. So you can be proactive and maybe call like a contact you have on site, and you can call them and be like, hey, Rowell, I noticed that, you just have a lower bandwidth, or you just lost access to this website. Can you validate for me on site? Do you have anyone complaining about it? And then you can, at least it looks better on you, better on your team. And then you can, anticipate the next step to take to fix the issue or make the situation better.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that gives me a good segue to mention what many customers do is that, okay, the networking team, of course, has the full visibility, all the nitty-gritty details of the data collected by the sensors. But many of them, they share what we call a public dashboard with their employees. So if an employee has an issue with the network, they can very easily go to, let's say, public.netbeezcloud.net, right? And they can check themselves if the location is doing okay or not. And if it doesn't, then they already know, because an issue has been detected, that the IT team is on it, right? So to reduce the stress also from opening tickets and communicating with all the like constituents.
IT help desk, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I can throw in here a URL, because you guys are having like a public dashboard that pulls data from your
sensors
demo dashboard we gave you. Yeah, so we can put this in there, of course, in the description. But if folks want to go to public.netbeezcloud.net/CTS from Clear to Send, they will see. It's without authentication, so it's like open to everybody. Don't bring it down. You can see like some of the data that you could share easily with your employees. That it's kind of red and green, right? Everything is green, everything is happy. If it's red, the IT knows about it and is working on it, right?
Yeah, and I like the idea of doing the dashboard, because there's going to be companies with NOC teams or IT teams that like to put dashboards on TV screens, for example, and you'll be able to see like right away what the problem is, if it's a company as a whole or maybe just a single site. And I think it's important to mention again that these are individual sensors that you could place throughout your environment. They're little devices the size of your hand. And what's nice about that compared to other companies who say their APs can be a sensor, it brings a conversation of whether you're going to test from an AP, where APs are usually mounted up in the ceiling, or you're going to test near the user and try to make it as close as a client device as possible. So I think that's also important to consider, is that you're testing it closer towards the client side.
Yeah, exactly, right. So we all know that many vendors have the ability maybe to switch their APs to sensors, or do some ad hoc testing, right? But yes, in our case, the whole idea is that you want to capture the user experience, so you have to place the sensors where the users are, at the desk level, right, and in the congestion areas. And that captures the best visibility, and it also actually has a placebo effect. Many people tell us that if users, if like the IT tells them, hey, this is a sensor that takes care of the Wi-Fi and it's looking for you and taking care of you, for some reason support gets reduced. I don't know if people are like, okay. we call the placebo effect of NetBeez, right? That for no reason, if there is a sensor there blinking, yes, things are better.
I like that, the placebo effect of NetBeez.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So would you be able to go, I'm interested in talking about the Wi-Fi side of things. I'm interested in, talking about the hardware that you have in the sensor. Maybe you can go into more details into what type of hardware you guys use, what type of Wi-Fi NICs, what type of work are you doing to test the Wi-Fi, and how do you send, which data are you collecting, right? Which metric are you looking at, and how are you sending that data back to your dashboard? Would you be able to just give us an overview of how all that works?
Yeah, definitely. So the device, the the core of the device, I would say, is we use Raspberry Pi platform as the platform that collects the information, runs the remote sensor software. So it's pretty much Linux box. We're not tied to the Raspberry Pi. Actually, we have some other platforms for wired sensors.
Okay.
But the gist of it is that it's a Linux box, right? That we use for our core hardware. Now, for the Wi-Fi sensor, we use right now it's 802.11 AC dongle. 8812AU chipset, if you want to get into more detail. So it's dual band, of course, DFS channels, and it has the PoE integrated everything, so customers can use, folks can use either PoE configuration, which of course in the Wi-Fi space everybody wants PoE, but some folks want to just plug it into the wall. And also many, they operate it as actually with a battery. They want to be really mobile. They can have a battery pack that they can use for a day or so each time if they want to move around and do like some more advanced things, right? So in terms of the Wi-Fi metrics that we collect right now is of course formation, like what access point the device is connected to, what channel, and all these things that are important to know. And then in terms of metrics, we give you information about around the signal strength that the device detects. Again, think about having the sensor exactly where the user is, so now where the user is behind walls, behind interference, and all these things, what really the signal strength is, right? Compared to information that you cannot extract from an access point. Also, data like link quality, what bitrate the agent has negotiated with the access point, and all that. Of course, think about it, having all this data from multiple sensors, right? Dozens or even hundreds of these on a single view. So it gives you the ability to very easily isolate outliers, see what's going on, what's wrong, and help you identify issues, and when they started, right? So we have historical about this information. That's the important thing, right? So let's say somebody opens a ticket today around weird or vague networking Wi-Fi issue. You don't know when it started, when it stopped, if it's intermittent, and so on and so forth. If everybody's affected, if only specific locations are affected. So having the historical now for these metrics, you can go back in time and see how things have evolved. And this, of course, is invaluable when you're troubleshooting very finicky or intermittent issues, I would say.
And I have to say, this is amazing. I love this feature in the dashboard, the history, and being able to go back in time. It's really well done in the dashboard too. Like you guys did a great job, and it's something, it's not always something we have, but the way you present it in the dashboard, it's I just love it. You have, maybe we can Roel, maybe we can add a screenshot to the show notes, but you can actually see the SSID your agent is connected to. You can see the name of your agent, and then you can see for that agent over the past, you select you select the period you want to look at. You can see the bit rate, you can see the signal strength, you can see the link quality, and you can see the what else do you see? The channel to which you are connected to, right? So it's I really like that feature. And just to add to what you were saying, Panos, I think here it's important to specify that you guys use the Wi-Fi, so the Wi-Fi dongle, and you use that Wi-Fi dongle to connect to the, let's say, the corporate SSID, or to connect to the SSID you want to validate. You're not using the Wi-Fi dongle in a passive mode where you're just discovering the RF environment, right?
Yes, so exactly. So the device, another client in your network. So you can configure the authentication credentials, .1x or PSK or whatever it is, right? And it's gonna authenticate. And of course, the other thing to point out here, since you brought this up, Francois, is that you can monitor actually multiple SSIDs with one sensor. The way this is being done is that, of course, in a typical corporate environment, there are going to be 3, max 4 SSIDs, right? That we care about, guest, internal, or whatever it is, right? And so if you want to monitor more than one SSIDs, you don't need multiple sensors. The same sensor can go from one SSID to the next in a round-robin fashion. So you can have this information from multiple SSIDs, which of course gives the ability to have more coverage around what you want to monitor.
Yeah, and I've tested this feature out with the agent. So just so you guys know, prior to recording this, we did get some test agents to move around in the interface and actually get an understanding of how NetBeez actually works, just so we can develop some conversation around this. And one of the things I liked when you're talking about the SSIDs and how you can configure multiple SSIDs to connect to, there is an agent log, and you could actually see the association or reassociation when that happened with a timestamp. And so it's good to correlate that information on that log with any other issues you might be encountering in your environment. And then you can view things just specifically to that agent when it comes to the performance, the transmit or receive rate, for example, and the link quality or signal strength. I kind of want to go back to when you mentioned being able to use that agent with a battery pack, because when you're collecting this data, you use the Wi-Fi adapter to collect the data, but does all that crunching, the number crunching, is it done on the agent, or is that all done in the cloud when it uploads that data?
Right. So the agent doesn't do much of processing. It collects a data point and then just sends to the server. The only thing that the agent does independent of the server, I would say, is that if for some reason the agent loses access to the server, to the dashboard, so it doesn't have the ability to upload data in real time, it caches them locally in its card, and when the reconnection gets established, it uploads it. Okay, so that's kind of functionality in a nutshell of the agent: collect data and upload. And of course, to make sense out of the data, you need to have data from multiple agents on the same kind of database. So that's why all the crunching, all the data processing, all the statistics are being done on the server. Okay. So that gives you the ability, of course, an agent wouldn't have the processing capability to do much of data processing also, but it doesn't have visibility on what other agents do, right? That's why everything is done on the dashboard. Which also mentioned here can be on-premise or on the cloud, right? Some customers that are very security sensitive, they have really strict concerns in healthcare, in financial institutions, they go with an on-premise server, right? So it can be on-premise, and it also can be on the cloud, of course, that also many folks prefer to do these days. Yeah.
So if you're using the agent and it's not connected to the network via the Ethernet cable, does that mean you could power it up with a battery through USB and then be able to walk around with that agent and maybe test out, I don't know, roaming, for example, with this agent?
Yeah, exactly. So we have two modes, I would say. One, we call it wired wireless, and the most popular one where you plug in the agent to an Ethernet cable, like an access point, right? And so it uses that Ethernet wired connection to talk to the server, upload the data, receive commands, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, does all the testing on the Wi-Fi interface, right? That is kind of the most stable option because you have the reliable connection, and then the Wi-Fi connection is just used for testing. Now, if, of course, the wired connection is not available, or as you mentioned, you want to go mobile and you want to go around with a battery to test roaming and stuff, the agent also has the ability to use the wireless connection, the wireless channel, as the communication channel with the server. So on the same channel, the Wi-Fi does both the communication with the server and the testing. And of course, that gives you more flexibility. You can go around. If you lose the wire connection, you can use it as a wireless-only agent. And as I said, because we cache the results locally, even if temporarily for a minute or two, or even like a day, right? You lose the connectivity with the server, the data is cached locally on the device. It's going to be uploaded next time that the connection is established.
Okay, I think that's a really good feature to have, especially if people want to validate a very specific scenario. Maybe they have an application that requires a roaming, or maybe they're trying to troubleshoot an issue where people are roaming from one area of the office to another, but they're encountering some sort of Wi-Fi issue. You can have somebody go out there and test it with an agent and collect that data and perform these tests. Now, we've been talking a lot about capturing this data, trying to be proactive and also do some network troubleshooting. Can you talk about how we go about collecting this data? Because you don't just put an agent on your network, configure an SSID for it to join, and then it's all good, right? You probably have to set up some sort of test to really get more data out of these agents instead of just looking at basic Wi-Fi connectivity.
Yes, exactly. So by default, as soon as you deploy an agent and you connect to wireless or multiple, like wireless networks with multiple SSID hopping, the agent will collect the basic like layer one information, like as I mentioned, right? Like the signal strength and so on and so forth. That's great and useful. But then, of course, since every user's needs are different, you have the ability to customize what active tests you want to monitor. So you have the ability to run a number of tests, like you have to run a latency test from, let's say, the agent to Google or whatever internet host you want to monitor, right? You have the ability to test your DNS server. So you can configure the device, the agent, to run a DNS query by using your DNS servers or any public DNS server. You can run an HTTP test to test specific applications. I see here on your public, on your dashboard that you guys are using to test NetBeez. You used to you're creating an HTTP test to Facebook, to your website, Clear to Send, right? To Slack, to Twitter. That of course gives you also, even if you're a network engineer, you want to have this data point to know if you're at school, right? Everybody uses Netflix, everybody uses Facebook, everybody uses Blackboard. So you want to have that information and have the ability to know, maybe in my dorm, the sensor says that Facebook is slow or Netflix is slow, right? That gives the ability to be proactive and know about issues before they happen. And of course, the set of testing is more broad. You can do speed test to either to Netflix, right? To Netflix CDN server, or to the typical Ookla server we know. Do a VoIP testing, very useful, of course, in healthcare these days that everybody has a VoIP device on them, and VoIP is very important in that case. And also run a typical iPerf test, right? So iPerf, again, helps you, gives you the ability to run this, let's say, one type of speed test pretty much that helps you understand how your WAN and also WLAN links do and are supposed to do compared to your baselines.
I was going to ask, Panos, when you set up those tests, can you define if you want to do these tests from the Wi-Fi card or if you want to do them from the Ethernet card?
So each sensor in our case, it's going to do, if you have a Wi-Fi sensor, all the testing is done on the Wi-Fi card.
Okay.
If you want to monitor your wired infrastructure, then you can get a wired sensor that each one of the sensors does its own thing.
Okay, I see what you mean. Okay, so by default, if you have a Wi-Fi card, it will just run the test from the Wi-Fi interface.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's where it's going to be beneficial to have both kinds of sensors, because you don't want to just test only wireless or only wired, because some of these issues can come up from anywhere, right? So if one of the examples I had earlier was someone couldn't reach a cloud file storage application. They just said it was down, but it looked like it was a Wi-Fi issue. Now, if you had both sensors, the wired and wireless sensor, testing to this application, like a ping, DNS or HTTP or even traceroute, if those fail on all your sensors and it's HTTP, for example, then you could say, okay, it's not the network, it's possibly the application itself having the problem, right? Or if you couldn't go to a specific website, you can tell on the wireless and wired that it's a DNS issue. So it's not just a wireless issue, or it's not just a wired issue. So this kind of sensor and having it distributed amongst different areas of your environment will help you get down to the root cause a lot faster, rather than having to chase these false problems, right? Because users don't really know what the problem is. They usually just know, if I'm on Wi-Fi, it's a Wi-Fi problem.
Also, like if you have one connected to the LAN and another one connected to the WLAN, to the Wi-Fi, you can run the same test. Going back to your example, you could run the same test from both sensors and try to compare the results and try to see if you see the same type of issue from both sensors, or if you only see the issue from the Wi-Fi sensor, and try to isolate, okay, is it a Wi-Fi issue, or is it somewhere, like an issue somewhere else on the network? I think that could help you to do that.
Those are great examples of these tests that you could run. So one of the tests that I ran on the sensor on my network was I have a local iPerf server. So when you run a test, you create this target on NetBeez cloud, and the target is going to be my iPerf server. And so the test, you put in the parameters for iPerf, and on my Wi-Fi agent, I have it do a test on a regular basis. And so now I have this trend over time, right? What does it normally look like? And then you can create an alert for an anomaly, for example, which is definitely possible to do on NetBeez. Is you create an alert for an anomaly where if there's a significant change, you can create an alert that gets sent via, email or SNMP, and then you can start looking into it. And so if you see a huge performance hit over Wi-Fi, then you can start looking into why that is, for example. So that's just like one use case I did on my home network, and was able to simulate that with like throttling. I would throttle the SSID and really lower the performance, and then trigger an alert.
Yeah, and to expand a little bit this well, so we have the Wi-Fi, the wired. The latest sensor we released is a Docker-based sensor, containerized. So even you can now deploy a NetBeez agent on your laptop, right? Windows or Mac or anywhere, like now with containers. Also have a virtual agent. That means that you can deploy it in your data center. So if you want to do this hub and spoke, let's say, iPerf testing, right, from all your remote sites towards your data center. Also, a cloud agent. If you're an Azure, AWS user, you can put one of our agents in any cloud provider you are working with, and cover that end of your corner. And again, this is very important when you want to have a holistic view of your end-to-end performance, right? Because right now, of course, everything's in the cloud, everything is centralized somewhere. You can have this holistic view on your Wi-Fi side, the wired side, your backhaul, and all your virtual infrastructure. And at the end of the day, even install an agent on a user's laptop. Let's say somebody complains about issues and so on and so forth. You can install a Docker containerized agent on their own machine and do some troubleshooting there, right? And see if you can identify issues that they may not know about.
So with that Docker instance, that means you could troubleshoot it from the perspective of a laptop, for example, so you can test it over its Wi-Fi connection?
Yeah, exactly. So it's another NetBeez agent runs on the laptop. So whatever that agent collects, what data it sees, whatever DHCP information it gets, it's whatever the user it gets, right? So that gives you the absolutely end user experience on the dashboard. Of course, It may not be scalable to install a Docker agent on all your users, but nonetheless, if you really need to, you go down to that path, you have that ability.
Yeah, so you can at least get as close to the client as possible, and then from the dashboard you can initiate those tests, for example. So if they have issues going to Slack, for example, you could do some Slack target tests on that agent and configure that remotely.
Yes, exactly. So you have now this remote site user, and you can control their machine in terms of what NetBeez tests you can run, right? And you can, help them understand even, right, where the issues they have may be coming from. And by also giving you the ability to have a GUI console on its NetBeez agent. So as I mentioned, it's a NetBeez agent is a Linux box. So we give you the ability on our dashboard to have a GUI console on its agent, so you can have remote command line access to your user's device to do any ad hoc troubleshooting or testing. I don't know if you played with that feature on the dashboard, but many folks use it for troubleshooting purposes.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing feature because you can really get the you get the data from the Wi-Fi NIC that you use in your corporate network. So it's even more accurate than using the one that's in the sensor, right? Because it's using the same driver as what your customer devices are using. So I think it's an amazing product.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can see you actually diving in a little bit deeper on the actual client devices and getting a characteristic of how that device works. I think that might have a really strong troubleshooting step, is having that roll out to a device, maybe validate a device somehow. I'd like to even test that out myself and put it in a Docker container and see how it works. But yeah, I could see that being used in a lot of environments, even when so one of the things that I've always wanted to do is maybe test an AP out. So if you have maybe a bunch of MacBook Pros, say 10 of them, could you do the agent on every single one, have them all do the same type of test, maybe an iPerf test to try to get a specific throughput to gauge the quality of the connection through that access point, for example? Is that something that's possible?
Yeah. Actually, that's very easy to set up. Let's go back to the Docker container. Docker agent, yes, you just install the Docker agent on each one of these laptops. Then you can, of course, make sure that the laptops are connected to the same access point if you just want to take test one and hammer it. And then you can just from the dashboard, you can schedule, like, you're going to run an iPerf test from all these 10 laptops exactly the same time, let's say on the hour or 5 minutes after the hour, right? To a specific one single iPerf server. And then you can collect the data from all these laptops on the dashboard, right? That can be very easily done and automated now. I mean, if you think about how to do this now manually, you have to go to its laptop, start an iPerf client, make sure you run at the same time manually. Then you have to collect the results, put them in a spreadsheet, right?
That's what I do. It's painful.
Yes. Yeah. So it's not scalable, right? You can do it with 1 or 2 or 3 devices, and that's great. iPerf is a free tool, and everybody can use it and should be able to use it like on a command line. But yes, it breaks down when you try to do it like for more than.
I've done it up to 12 devices, and it's challenging. Okay. Yeah. That would be awesome if I could. Could you install a Docker? Stupid question, because
Francois.
Sorry.
You're pretty fast at clicking on each of those laptops.
No, I would just introduce one device every like 2-3 minutes. I wanted to see, at one point the AP would break, so I would just add a new device every 5 minutes.
Yeah, you're trying to figure out the threshold. That's where I was going at is, you try to replicate the traffic characteristics of some piece of software, for example, or application, and then you test that against your access points to develop where that threshold is for capacity and density would be one example. But it'd be a nice test to run just to test the capabilities of an access point.
Can you install a Docker container on an Android device?
Honestly, I haven't tried it.
Okay.
Of course, you can do it on Mac, Linux, Windows. Android, I don't think there are any. They officially support Docker yet.
Okay.
I'm sure it's gonna happen. It's gonna come out at some point.
That would be nice.
If not out yet. But I don't think you can do it out of the box right now.
So what about then Wi-Fi 6 panels? So let's say I have a laptop, it has a Wi-Fi 6 adapter, and I want to do some tests for Wi-Fi 6. What are some of the gotchas there for the NetBeez agent itself? Like, are you guys testing anything with Wi-Fi 6? Anything that you can gather from these agents to validate Wi-Fi 6 operation?
Yeah, so as you know, there are very few, especially clients right now, right, in the Wi-Fi 6 protocol. We've all seen like the Intel, card and a few others, right? Right now, we don't have the ability to do Wi-Fi 6 in our sensor. Okay, it's something that in the next year or so we'll start introducing. The workaround would be, yes, I mean, you've seen, like, for example, you can get this Intel card if you want to do your laptop Wi-Fi 6 enabled, right? You can install it. You can and run the Docker container, right? So the good thing with the Docker container is that because everything is kind of abstracted, we don't care what the end connection is, right? If it's wired, wireless, and so on and so forth. So if you have a Wi-Fi 6 enabled Mac or PC, then you can very well install the NetBeez agent in the Docker container form and do the same testing you do today. Of course, you won't be able right now to collect any information regarding, signal strength or link quality on the Wi-Fi 6 card, but it's something that, of course, is going to come out pretty soon, I think, when we start seeing more clients in the Wi-Fi 6 space.
Yeah, because I'd be interested to show people, like, if you put it on a bunch of Windows laptops with an Intel Wi-Fi 6 card, is to show how the efficiency actually kicks in compared to, say, Wi-Fi 5, right? And so as you add more clients, you could see the performance dip on Wi-Fi 5, but maybe on Wi-Fi 6, since there's all these claims for efficiency, we should be able to see it stay a little bit more consistent or even better with Wi-Fi 6. I think that's like one way to test out using NetBeez and the containerized agent. I think that would be pretty interesting to see if that can be done, even if it's not just gathering Wi-Fi specific data, but even just on the tests that you perform, and you could see with the graphs how that looks like Wi-Fi 5 compared to Wi-Fi 6.
You gave me the best idea for my next blog post. Unless you get there first, okay? So
I'd have to invest in a lot of laptops. One thing that I wanted to go into, because we talked about these tests and targets that you perform, can you give us some use cases of how some people have used that to do proactive detection or network troubleshooting?
Yeah. So I would say, the two important pillars of our use cases are monitoring and visibility, right? So the first thing that happens is that when you have these agents installed on your network and you configure them, tests that you care about. We talked about, HTTP, DNS tests to different targets, can be Facebook, Netflix, so on and so forth. Of course, because the agents run these tests continuously, So it's like another user, right, running these tests. You create baselines, right? So you have a baseline of your network over a period of time. That's something that we don't really know very well today, right? What's going on, which locations outperform others, which locations suffer, right? That gives you the first visibility, I would say, use case where you know what's the normal state of affairs on your network. Then the second thing is when things go out of whack, right? Either, of course, when things are catastrophic, let's say when an application fails, or let's say DHCP fails or DNS fails, that of course can be detected very quickly because many people will complain. NetBeez will also detect these kind of issues. So it's like kind of a failure, I would say, type of alert, as we call them. But then the more subtle ones that can be a precursor to bigger problems or then be intermittent is when you have a baseline and you suddenly see variations, you see deviations from that baseline, right? 1x, 2x, right? Your latency increases suddenly, or you start seeing increased packet loss, right? This monitoring helps you identify issues and also know who's affected. And today, usually you have to wait for users to complain to you about this kind of issues. But more importantly, when you start troubleshooting, you don't have anywhere to look at other than what the user told you in a ticket or over the phone. Okay, so that's where this data comes in very, very, very valuable and important. So to have a baseline, have visibility, and detect and troubleshoot very quickly and easily.
Now, when you talk about those variations or deviations from a baseline, are those automatically detected for the user, and do they get notified, or is that something they should specify in finding these anomalies? Is there like specific anomalies that they should configure in the dashboard?
So by default, when you have your NetBeez installation, yes, anomaly detection is there. You don't have to do anything. What needs to be changed sometimes, right, is the sensitivity, right? Sometimes we have customers, for example, that run 1 second ping tests, and they want to know if there's a failure within 5 seconds, right? Think about a telco that if something like that happens, it's very critical to detect it very quickly, right? If you want to meet SLAs, you're going to detect that you're violating an SLA as soon as possible to be able to fix things, right? Otherwise, it costs money. So these are there. So the sensitivity can change in terms of how quickly you get notified about an alert of this kind. So I want to be notified within 5 seconds or 2 minutes, right? And also in terms of how broad is the problem, right? So you may want to be notified only when all your locations have the same problem, or you might want to be notified only even one location has the slightest problem. So it's configurable, but nonetheless, the default options cover most of the use cases.
So are you guys thinking of, when I hear all of this baseline network and sensitivity and all of that, are you guys thinking of implementing a little bit of machine learning and intelligent AI, I guess, artificial intelligence to have the system adjust the sensitivity automatically based on the baseline?
Yeah, it's something that actually we're working on. Right now, the process, it's kind of manual, so you have to test a little bit things and then adjust it manually. But yeah, you can very easily from the data collect, you can extract patterns. Of course, typical pattern is, okay, during business hours, things get worse, right? Latency increases, packet loss increases, right? You shouldn't be notified if something like that happens during business hours, right?
Okay.
Then, off hours, if that happens, might be a completely different story, right? You should know about it. So these are kind of things that, of course, can be captured and reduce the alert fatigue, as we call it, right? So when things go wrong.
That's awesome. Okay. Something something we didn't really talk about, but I really like about NetBeez is, the way NetBeez integrate with other systems, right? So you can actually connect NetBeez to a system like Slack or Splunk or other systems, so you can actually extract the data you get from NetBeez, and maybe you use Slack for your support tickets, and NetBeez can create tickets automatically in Slack or send Slack notifications to the proper person. Do you guys integrate with like service now on those systems as well?
Yeah. So we have some specific integrations. For example, Splunk is one, Slack is one that you can natively integrate with those tools. Of course, Slack is one of the most popular one because everybody's using it. So you have the ability to give you a scenario to have a channel that all the NetBeez alerts are being sent there. And now, of course, if your whole team is on Slack, which it is, then you can, have the whole team chat about the same alert, right? See what's going on and give you the ability to integrate the collaboration, the data of NetBeez. Now, with any other third-party tools, you mentioned ServiceNow. I mean, the way to go is with the API. So have an API that can pretty much do anything you want. So you have the ability to integrate, and actually the public dashboard that we talked about earlier, that is kind of vanilla, watered down version of the NetBeez dashboard, use the API to pull all the data that you only need, right, to display the information that you want to really see.
Okay, so you're using the API to create those dashboards, so you can create a custom dashboard and display the data how you like using the API.
Yes. I mean, the API, of course, in the core of our tool, on the back end of our tool. The API is what you use, to move data around and pull data. So we use it internally, but also it's open, so any user can use the API to do custom things, right? And many do, of course.
Well, do you have any unique use cases that you can share how people have used the API?
Yes. So we have a customer that they are a multinational company. They have, I think, more than 150 of our agents. And since they're multinational, they have multiple NOCs and data centers around the world. So they have, of course, one in the US, one in EMEA, and so on and so forth, right? So, of course, out of the box, we give them a unique NetBeez dashboard that captures data from all sensors and displays them on their dashboard, and that's fine. But what they want to do was to create 3 or 4 different dashboards for each region, so each team can have their own data, right? So the team in Singapore doesn't care about the team, what's going on in Asia, right? So kind of like more of an ability to isolate data. So for that, they use the API to pull information for each team from the sensors that they really care about and need to know about. And so they have like 3 or 4 different dashboards right now for each location that they were able to customize in terms of which sensors are included, what data is presented, and so on and so forth. So that's like a use case that has shown the ability and the scalability of our API, I would say.
Okay, so they're tying it into their application and then getting geolocation specific with that.
Yes. And then, of course, they use all that because they have their own kind of customized NetBeez dashboard. And then, of course, they have more integrations because they have more tools, that PagerDuty and so on and so forth, right? That they use to pull data from NetBeez to make sure that, they have the information they need when something comes up, when a ticket is opened, or when something goes wrong and detected by NetBeez even.
Does that mean they're also creating their own agents? Because I know with it being a Linux backend, you could probably create your own agent with whatever device you have, right?
I mean, those folks not specifically, but some people do. I mentioned, of course, with the Docker, you can put it anywhere, so you can create your own agent, whatever you want. But also have a Debian package. So if you have any type of Ubuntu or Debian machine, you can install our package and install our agent. That gives you the flexibility to very quickly, I would say, install software agents without having to deploy the hardware. Of course, that doesn't cover the Wi-Fi case we're talking about today. That's mostly for the hardware visibility. But if you have like any Debian-based box, you can install a NetBeez agent pretty much.
Okay. And does it matter which Wi-Fi adapter is being used? Is there like a list of adapters that are fully supported by NetBeez?
Yeah, in that respect, yes. We support specific chipsets that we, for example, the 8812AU, the 85, what is it, RT3502, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, there are specific chipsets and dongles we support. Others we kind of add more support as needed, right, by people's requests or customers. Yes.
Are there any other features you want to talk about that we haven't mentioned? I know Francois and I have been going through the dashboard and testing a few things, and we've covered about the different tests that we're able to do, because you can do the iPerf, the speed tests, ping.
I do want to talk about something, Roel.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I liked is you actually, when you deploy your agent, you actually have the ability to go into the console. So you can see pretty much your Raspberry Pi, and then you have the ability to run some tests from there. So what I was able to do actually is start an iPerf server on the sensor itself, and we actually tried to to establish an iPerf test between your sensor, Roel, and my sensor. Yeah. We had firewalls in between. So
yeah, we'd have to open up firewall rules or set up a VPN connection to each other. But I see where you're going with that. If you've got multiple agents on the same network, you could do tests to each other.
My question would be to Panos is, could you like create your own scripts if you want to do something custom and then push them or install them on the Raspberry Pi, or are you limited in terms of what you can do from the console?
So we usually give root access to our customers. So okay. If you want to do something custom, yes, you can use the console, and you have the ability and the skills to do so. If you break something, we'll fix it, I guess. But you can do that, right? So we have, for example, customers that use the console a lot that you just mentioned, Francois. When they detect an issue, but they want really quick to run, let's say, ping command to the gateway or to 1111 or whatever, right? And that gives them the ability to do that in a scalable way. Again, it's all about scalability, right? On multiple sensors without having to SSH to each one, right? Run credentials, login, and all these things, right? Yeah.
How about reporting? Do you guys offer customized reports, or are they canned reports? And what kind of information can you generate to put on a report?
Yeah, so the reporting is first of all, one thing we have to mention is that the data retention. So you have the ability to manage how much data you want to keep. Depending on your hard disk or what type of service you have, you can keep data up to a year, I would say. So very granular. And then, of course, the reporting now is based, of course, on the historical data. The reporting now gives you the ability to slice and dice all the information you collect, right? And that, of course, usually what higher management want to see, like a report of my weekly or monthly status of my network, right? And how did this last Wi-Fi 6 upgrade I did, right? Did it return any results or not? So you have the ability to choose what sensors you want to get data from and create a report, what specific tests, if you want only the bandwidth test or only the DNS or HTTP testing. And you can extract this as a PDF, share it with all your team, and you can also put on a schedule, right? So let's say every Friday, you send to everybody that is responsible for the Wi-Fi network a report of the status of the past week. So everybody gets in their inbox and they can see if everything was okay or if there are any red flags there. So yeah, that's something that, of course, helps you to understand better around what's going on around your data and baselines, actually.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, because I know there's going to be some sort of manager that wants to see a highlight of what's going on, and being able to customize that, I think, is important, especially when you're trying to give information. You don't want to give too much, or you don't want to make it too noisy, for example.
Right, exactly.
What are some of the new features that are coming out with NetBeez? Like, what are you guys working on for future releases? I'm sure Wi-Fi 6 is on the horizon for you guys, but what else can you give us and the listeners about NetBeez and what they can look forward to?
Yeah, so with this upcoming release now that is going to be out in a couple of weeks, we are on the Wi-Fi side, we are introducing Wi-Fi timing information. So you will, right now, I would say each sensor connects to the Wi-Fi network and will just tell you it's connected or not and if everything is okay and when it drops. But from this upcoming release, we'll give you breakdown of its connection. So we'll tell you like, okay, this sensor took that many milliseconds to authenticate, that many to associate, and then that much time to get a DHCP address, and also tell you if it can, connect to the internet, right, or the network. So that's going to give you a breakdown of its, connection state and timing of your sensors, and also we have the ability to do this periodically, right? So you'll be able, if you have, for example, a DHCP issue, you'll be able to ask each agent to do this periodically, let's say every 5 minutes or half an hour, do a reconnection. So you'll be able to detect things like DHCP failures, right? Because you will be able to see that, okay, my sensors can authenticate, associate, but they cannot get a DHCP address. So maybe my pool is exhausted, right? Or my DHCP server is down.
Yeah, that actually brings up something else that I just thought of is when you're configuring them to go to a specific SSID. Today, does NetBeez support captive portals? Is there a way for someone to try to get through that?
For the captive portal, you have to whitelist the device, the MAC address. You cannot really natively do it from the dashboard, right? So that's how people that have captive portal today use NetBeez.
Okay. And how about supporting 802.1x? Is that also supported today?
Yes, this support today with all the different, authentication methods, right? So yeah, certificates, keys, everything is, we have the ability to authenticate with 802.11.1x.
Awesome. Francois, you want to add anything to that before we end the show?
So I guess before we end, I wanted to talk about pricing a little bit. What information can you give us about pricing? How do customer pay? Is it every month, every year? And is it the same pricing for the sensor versus the Docker container? Can you give us a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, of course. So the pricing per sensor, so it starts like the MSRP, let's say, right? It's a few $100s per sensor. So this kind of for the basic plan, right? So if you start with the most basic 10 agents, minimum number of agents, then that's how much you pay. It's an annual contract. You can choose if you want on-premise or cloud server, again, depending on your requirements or needs. We support both. The subscription includes the hardware, so you don't have to pay extra anything up front, right? It's like a lease type of model. So you pay subscription, includes the hardware, either for this Wi-Fi, wired, or Docker agent. There's a price difference between the two, between the Docker and the Wi-Fi or wired sensors. The Docker is only software. So, it's a little bit cheaper than the wired, the hardware-based sensors. But of course, the important thing is that the price is scalable. The more sensors you get, there's a discount, the price per agent drops. So you can, cover all your corners of your network, not only with Wi-Fi, but also with, we mentioned like wired, virtual, Docker agents, right? You can install, even hundreds of these agents without having to, have to pay an arm and a leg, right? So it's scalable from a price perspective, technology perspective, that gives you the ability to be able to have full coverage without having to really break the bank.
Okay, that's interesting. I was thinking would you have like a solution for maybe in the future, like for people like me and Roel that just do work for different customers and want to have the ability to drop a couple of sensors when they're troubleshooting an issue, or let's say you just deploy a new Wi-Fi and you want to drop a sensor for a month until make sure that everything is going well after your deployment. Would you have like an option in the future for people like us that wants to do that and don't want to opt in like an annual subscription, if you see what I mean?
We love you guys, so we'll find a solution for you, right? So,
but is that a use case you have a lot of requests for, or is it just like me?
So we have a few. We used to have a free tier that we discontinued for different reasons. So people would have one or two sensors, right, for free, but we discontinued that. However, for folks out there that just have the use case you described, I would tell them to reach out. And actually, we have, already we have like a kind of community dashboard that for people that have things like needs like that, right? We can give you access to do some of your limited testing, right? You don't, of course, you don't need hundreds of agents, right? So that's something you can reach out to us, Or you can reach us at info@netbeez.net, I would say. So if you want to reach out for specific things or requests like that, use that email.
Awesome. Thank you, Panos. Thank you for really going through what NetBeez has to offer. I really like the different tests that you could do and have it a distributed test and then correlate that in the dashboard amongst all your sensors. And I especially like the whole containerized NetBeez agent because I think that has a lot of potential for further testing with multiple devices, especially with the laptops that people are using. And also with the upcoming Wi-Fi 6, that'd be pretty interesting to test. Now, you guys do have a special link out there for everyone. It's netbeez.net/clear2send. And of course, we'll have show notes where we'll include photos. We'll also include videos of the NetBeez agent. And that's clear2send.net/187. And again, more information. We'll include more links in the show notes because there's some there's a blog article you guys should read, and also link out to the public dashboard of me and Francois' agent so you can see what kind of tests we're running. And then looking at just general information about NetBeez, you can go to netbeez.net/wireless-monitoring. Panos, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure speaking to you and learning more about network monitoring and assurance. So I think people will find this valuable.
Yeah, thank you so much, Francois. Well, it was great chatting with you. Enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for all the great content you put out there for us. So looking forward to chatting with you again. I don't know, maybe at WLPC or somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. And if you guys have any comments or questions, feel free to leave comments in the show notes and we'll get back to you. And if you have any questions, we could forward that over to Panos as well. So thank you guys for listening.